the 5th canto, 8th chapter, verse 27. And it's the last set of verses. So after I finish these verses, we'll do a summation of the chapter again. So 5.8.27, Sayan Prabhu, if you don't mind, can you read the translation?
Yes, Prabhu. At the time of death, the king saw that the deer was sitting by his side, exactly like his own son, and was lamenting his death. Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer, and consequently, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer, and his material body, and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. Although he lost his human body and he received the body of a deer, he did not forget the incident of his past life.
So we see that in the agitation of separation, Bharat Maharaj, he lost his mental balance. So he fell down from his spiritual life, and he also fell down from his body. So he was at the point of leaving his body. So it says that at the time of death, he sees the deer sitting by his side, and it could be one of the two things, that because of his attraction to the deer, he imagined that the deer was sitting next to him, or the deer actually came back and was sitting next to him. So exactly like his own son. Sukadeva Goswami makes this point to reveal more about the details of the lessons of the pastime. So too much attachment to family, to material things, they basically result in this kind of absorption at the time of death. Srila Prabhupada once said that most of the men take birth as women and women as men because of so much of attraction to one another. And people who have a lot of attraction to animals or to pets, they may think about them at the time of death and get a body like their own. So we also see that the deer is lamenting at the death of Bharat Maharaj, which again may or may not be factual, that because of his own conception, Bharat Maharaj had come to the point where he thought that the deer is fully dependent on him, the deer is attracted to him, the deer loves him as much as he loves the deer. So just like he's lamenting the separation from the deer, he imagines that the deer is lamenting its separation from him. And again, this is also what happens in a broader context, that at the time of the death, the person thinks that what will my wife do, what will my husband do, what will my children do without me? But factually speaking, life goes on. Maybe there may be a separation, grief because of separation. There may be grief because if the person was supporting, there may be concern about that. But life always goes on. Nobody's death has resulted in people's life coming to a standstill, or their whole situation getting uprooted. There may be a turmoil, minor or major, but eventually it goes on. But in the mind of the person, it is different, and that increases the absorption. The person thinks, oh, what will this person do? How will he manage? How will she carry on? Right, and because of that, the absorption also intensifies. So Prabhupada says, Sukadeva Goswami says, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world in the body of a deer. So it's important to note that Bharat Maharaj was not bereft of Krishna consciousness. We had already discussed this in the previous verse, and that he was actually replete with Krishna consciousness. He was very, very advanced in Krishna consciousness. But he got an outcome like those bereft of Krishna consciousness by the arrangement of Krishna. And this we discussed quite extensively in our previous discussion. The reason he got the body of a deer is explained in Bhagavad Gita 8.6, famous word Yam Yam Vapi Swaran Bhavam Antajati Antkaleguram. That whatever state of mind one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without failing. And Prabhupada comments on it that due to his past activities in devotional service, he became determined to finish his devotional service even in the body of a deer. So the verse not only talks about his death, but it also talks about his next birth as a deer, and also his mental conception that as a deer, he was not an ordinary deer. He was Jati Smarana, he remembered his previous lifetime. And not only did he remember the events of the previous lifetime, he learned the lessons of them. He inherited the realizations. So that's why it is mentioned that Bharat Maharaj, the ultimate sign that this was the mercy of Krishna, was that Bharat Maharaj was continuously making spiritual advancement. So the deer Bharat was spiritually more advanced than the king Bharat. And Jat Bharat was spiritually more advanced than the deer Bharat. So regardless of what form that he took, he was continuously making spiritual advancements. Okay, let's move on to the next verse, 28.
Although in the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj, due to his rigid devotional service in his past life, could understand the cause of his birth in that body. Considering his past and present life, he constantly repented his activities, speaking in the following way.
So Prabhupada says that this is a special concession for a devotee. So again, these pastimes are not really meant for us to critique Bharat Maharaj, but to see how they apply to the life of a devotee. Now, Bharat Maharaj, of course, had very complete and clear memory of his previous lifetime. Now, when devotees are born, they may not have that kind of a memory. They may not remember what was I doing, but they definitely carry the realizations forward. This is the special concessions for a devotee, which is why it's said that when it says the advancement of the devotee, and it says there are three ways. One is by seniority by birth, the second is by initiation, and the third is by realization. And the realization that one has is also predicated on the previous life realizations, right? So each one of us must have empirical example of how people, they come fresh to Krishna consciousness. And some of them, they just take to it like fish to water. It's almost like you're reminding them, okay, this, yeah, I need to do this, right? And for some people, it takes a longer time. It's like almost you're teaching them. And why is that difference? Because of this special concession that Krishna gives, that he allows them to carry over their realization. Now, for non-devotees also, there is some level of continuity between the previous and the current life in terms of the subtle body. The subtle body carries forth the reactions to the karma. So as in the Nectar Devotion, as it is said that every activity that we do it results in what is called kutam. Kutam is impressions. And the kutam matures to breecham, the bijam matures to papam, the papam then becomes, the bijam then becomes, kutam becomes bijam becomes papam becomes prarabdha, and papam becomes prarabdha, and then the cycle continues. I may be missing something here, but the understanding is that these are all essentially the results of one's karmic activities. That if somebody was performing sins, then they would be inclined to perform sinful activities because of the kutam bijam or prarabdham. Somebody who is performing pious activities, they may be inclined to do so. Now, one may say that then it is the same for bhakti also. If one is performing devotional service, one may be inclined to continue to do so. But the difference is that devotional service is a relationship, is developing a relationship. Devotional service is realizations. It is a lot more subtle than the impressions that are left by karma. The impressions that are left by karma, they result in propensities. There are people who have a natural inclination for charity, natural inclination for impious activities. They may not have the realization. They will just work on those inclinations. But a devotee carries forth the realizations. It's like you meet with somebody, and then you may be separated, and then you meet the person again. Then you may not remember all the events, the time that you spent, but then you remember how the relationship was. That yes, I had a warm and loving relationship, and this person was always there for me. You may not remember when he was there, but yes, he was there for me. So it becomes very easy to re-establish that relationship. That is the special dispensation that Krishna gives to devotees. That's why Srila Prabhupada, at least in 2 purports or 3 purports, he quotes the Brahma Samhita, Karmani Nirdhati Kintucha Bhakti Bhajan, that those who perform devotional service, that cycle, that is now Karmani Nirdhati, it is now determined by Krishna. So Bharat Maharaj is born as what is called a Jati Smarana. Jati Smarana means that he had complete recollection of his previous lifetimes. So we see that very advanced devotees are also born with it. In the pastime of Tulsi Devi given in the Brahma Vaibhava Purana, we see that Radharani, she curses Vrinda Devi, she curses Sridama, and because of the curse they come. So Vrinda Devi comes as Tulsi, Sridama comes as Shankachud or Jalandhari, and Shankachud is a demon, Tulsi is the daughter of a king. So they're born in the material world, but they have complete recollection of the spiritual identity. They know exactly who they were, they know why they were cursed, they'll know that there was certain attraction between them. So in order to fulfill that, they come down to the material world. So they have complete recollection of their previous lives, right? So this is the special dispensation by the Lord for his advanced devotees. In terms of, so just give an example. So in terms of these personalities, like Tulsi Devi and Sridama, they had complete recollection. Bharat Maharaj had complete recollection. But other devotees, examples, as I was saying, they carry forth realizations and sometimes a little bit more than realizations, right? So we see in the case of Gajendra, that King Indradumna was cursed by Agastya Rishi, and he became an elephant. So he did not remember that he was a king in the previous time. He did not remember that he was a devotee. In fact, as an elephant, he was completely absorbed in being an elephant. But when he was purified by the prolonged, for 100 years, he was fighting with the crocodile, then he remembered. And even then he remembered a particular stotra. He remembered a particular a prayer. Right? We see that in the case of Ajamel. Ajamel used to be a devotee. And then he called his son Narayan and began calling him. And then at the time of death, he started calling Narayan. But that was not why he was rescued by the Vishnu Dutas. Because of calling Narayan, then his initial relationship with Narayan was revived. So that relationship that he had earlier, so this was in the same life, the relationship that he had of having taken shelter of Lord Narayan, that was revived. So that's why then his chanting of the name became Namabhas. So it wasn't fully purified, but it was purified to some extent. We see Vritrasur also. Vritrasur is in the category of course, pure devotee. That as Maharaj Chitraketu, he was advanced enough to be what is known as an associate of the Lord. Right? But he was cursed, he became Vritrasur, but he completed correction of his previous lifetime. So the lesson for us is that we should try and finish our material life in this birth. If not, then at least we can prepare for carrying the advancements in the next birth. Right? Because nothing that we do will be lost. Every realization that we have, every shloka that we learn, every book that we read, all of that will carry with us to our next life. We may not remember that we did Bhakti Vaibhava. We may not remember that we were serving the deities, but all those realizations will carry with us. Right? So that's why it is said that any activity done in the spiritual realm stays with us forever. This is the dispensation of the Lord. Okay, let's go on to verse 29.
In the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj began to lament. What misfortune! I have fallen from the path of sacrifice. I gave up my real son, wife, and home to advance spiritual life. And I took shelter in a solitary holy place in the forest. I became self-controlled and self-realized, and I engaged constantly in devotional service, hearing, thinking, chanting, worshipping, and remembering the Supreme Person of Godhead, Vasudeva. I was successful in my attempt, so much so that my mind was always absorbed in devotional service. However, due to my personal foolishness, my mind again became attached, this time to a deer. Now I have obtained the body of a deer and have fallen far from my devotional practices.
So what happens if one knowingly or unknowingly deviates? Right. So this is what what is recommended, rather. So this is what is recommended, that one should not be too absorbed in the fact that, oh, I've deviated for whatever reasons, whether it's because of external or internal factors. One should sincerely repent and then continue. And so as it is said that for anything that does not, for any offense that we do, we should recognize it, we should regret it, we should rectify, and then we should resume our spiritual life. So we should definitely not dwell on it too much. We should definitely not lament, saying that now there is no hope for me. Right? That's the difference between lamentation in the mode of goodness and ignorance. Lamenting in the mode of ignorance is giving up everything. Lamenting in the mode of goodness is that you feel regret, but then there is also rectification after that. So Srila Prabhupada writes a very nice preaching purport to this. He says that this is significant for every devotee, right? And then he makes nice points for practicing devotees. The first thing he says is that we should not misuse our position in bhakti to do whatever we like. Right? Essentially, the seventh is to commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name or on the strength of bhakti. One should not think like that. That karmani nirdhati kintucha bhakti bhajan. So my activities are going to be rectified by Krishna since I'm chanting or whatever, so I can continue to do sinful activities. Right? Prabhupada says one might suffer like Bharat Maharaj, and it might impair our devotional service. Bharat Maharaj was very exalted, so that he was able to continue performing the devotional service as a deer. Others may not be. They may actually have to stop, because only in the human form of life can one execute bhakti. Then Prabhupada also gives the assurance at the same time, says that by the grace of the Supreme Lord, the devotee is punished in such a way that his eagerness to attain the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva is increased. Right? And then Prabhupada summarizes that through the medium of Bharat Maharaj, Krishna teaches us that we must be careful in the discharge of devotional service. As far as members of ISKCON are concerned, we have sacrificed everything to push on this Krishna consciousness movement. Yet, they must take a lesson from the life of Bharat Maharaj to be very cautious and see that not a single moment be wasted. So Prabhupada, interestingly here, he builds on this one single theme of how to protect yourself from fall downs, right? And he says that by keeping yourself always busy in Krishna consciousness. So not a single moment is wasted in frivolous talk, sleep, or voracious eating. Eating is not prohibited, but we should not eat voraciously. Sense gratification ensues because of voracious eating, and you fall to a lower form of life. Prabhupada is essentially paraphrasing Atyahara Prayashchascha Prajapanya Mantra. So best advice you take from Rupa Goswami, Avyartha Kalvatam. Avyartha Kalvatam means that every moment of our lives is utilized in the rendering of devotional service. Right? So Rampal Maharaj also gives this example that if you just fill a cup with milk and just keep filling it with milk, then you don't have to worry about anything else like ink or any dirt coming in. If you just keep filling it with milk, then don't have to worry about anything else. How do I protect myself against this? What happens if this situation comes? So if we are just able to fill our life with Krishna consciousness, this is a theme that Prabhupada speaks about several times in the lives of practicing devotees. Like in the temple, he once said that we have deliberately created the program in such a way that every waking moment is the devotee is engaged in service. Beginning from the morning, Mangalarti, and chanting, Bhagavatam class, then Guru Puja, services, take rest, and then evening programs. From morning 4:30 till evening 9 p.m., the devotees are fully absorbed. And this is something that actually can be seen in when you discuss with the devotees who were there at the time in the 70s, especially the ones who were there in the 70s. Prabhupada was around. That they would share this, that we were so busy that we did not even have time to think that we are leading such austere lives. Like I was talking to a Prabhupada disciple who actually joined in the Potomac Temple, and so there was some discussion going on. The devotees in the temple were saying that there's not enough space and living areas need to be improved. And then he was just laughing. He was saying that when In the 70s, there were 60 brahmacharis at the temple, and they would basically just come and sleep in the temple room over there. And essentially, they just had a chadar, a blanket. They would sleep. Morning, they would get up, line up, take a shower, rush back for Mangal Arati. So he said, we didn't even have time to think that, oh, I just have this much space and I need more space, or there's not enough heat, or there's not enough air conditioning. So just that mood of immersing ourselves in Krishna consciousness, and as we do it, our taste also develops. Okay, next verse.
Also, Bharat Maharaj received the Buddha Vidya. By constant repentance, he became completely detached from all material things. He did not disclose these things to anyone, but he left his mother dear in a place known as Kalanjhara mountain, where he was born. He again went to the forest of Salagram and to the ashram of Pulasya and Pulaha.
So Pulaksya and Pula, as you know, they're rishis, very, very exalted personalities. I was not able to find out where the Kalanjhara mountain is, but it was apparently at some distance. That he was born as a deer in the Kalanjhara mountain, and then he made his way back to the same place where in his previous life he was performing devotional service. So it's mentioned that in the previous life he was on the bank of the Gandaki river. So here it is said he went to the forest of Shalagram. So Gandaki river, as we know, is the place where Shalagram is found, and he was in the area of Pulaha. So he deliberately went back to that area, but this time he went with a different reason. Last time, even though he was there, he was living in isolation. And there's no description of him having Ishtagoshtis with Pulastya Rishi or other devotees. And as we discussed, that even when he was giving up his spiritual practices and getting absorbed in the deer, there was nobody to correct him. So one of the realizations that he carried was that it is because of the lack of association that I fell. So the first thing he did was to rectify that. In this previous life, because of associating with the deer, he fell down. So in this life, the first thing he does is he gives up association with deer. Right? And again, deer in this case represents material attraction. So the first thing he did after he was born is to give up attachment to his mother, to other deer, and he goes and seeks the association of devotee. And Prabhupada writes that association is very meaningful. Therefore, ISKCON tries to perfect one who enters the society. The members of the society should always remember that the society is not like a free hotel. All the members should be very careful to execute the spiritual duties so that whoever will come will automatically become a devotee and will be able to return back to Godhead in this very life. And Prabhupada is, again, he's extracting the lessons of the past time and applying it to contemporary. That one should not live at ISKCON just for free room and board and free board and food. That I get a place to live and I get some food to eat and I do some activities and then it's taken care of. The main reason, as Prabhupada writes in the 7 purposes of ISKCON, the main reason is to create an environment where like-minded people can come together and associate with one another, and for the purpose of achieving the divine, achieving Krishna. Prabhupada also says that no one should be captivated by his birthplace and family. One should take shelter of the association of devotees and cultivate Krishna consciousness. Now, when one sees these pastimes, one may think that it's not a bad thing. Right? Sometimes it's said that Prabhupada says that personalities who live in holy dhams and commit offenses, they're forced to take body of a dog or a hog in the next birth, and then they go back to Godhead. Right now, one might think that it's not a bad deal. That I live in the holy dham, I do whatever I have to do. I take next birth as a dog, live for about 10 years, 12 years, and then go back to Godhead. So I don't have to perform sadhana, I don't have to get up for Mangalarti, don't have to chant. One life I live of material enjoyment. I have 10, 12 years of suffering. And then after that, I go back to Godhead. But important thing to understand is that the entry into the spiritual world is never a mechanical activity. That just by dying in a holy place or just by taking birth in a holy place, one does not get automatic access to the spiritual world. Just like it is said that those who are killed by Krishna go back to Godhead. But that's not, it depends on the desire of Krishna. In the third canto, we read that when I don't know if it was Uddhava who was speaking, or I think it was Maitreya Rishi was speaking to Vidur. Yeah, it was Maitreya. And then he explicitly mentions that those who were purified by the arrows of Arjun, when they gave up their body in the presence of Krishna, they went back to the spiritual world. And Prabhupada writes that being purified by the arrow of Arjun means because how can one get purified by the arrow that's coming to kill you? But being purified by that arrow means that one's realization now became pure about the position of Krishna, about the position of Arjun and their own position. And when Krishna saw this purity in the realization, then he allows them to go back to the spiritual world. Right? So the only way to go back to the spiritual world is Krishna Prema. There is no mechanical ways. Sometimes people try to jump under the wheel of the cart in Jagannath Puri, and people try to give up their, jump into the Ganges at different times, especially during when Kumbh Mela is done. So there are different conceptions that if I do this, I'll go back to Godhead. But these are all tamasic activities. There is only one way to go back to Godhead, and that is by Krishna Prema. Right? So what does it mean that when Prabhupada says that when those who commit offenses take birth as hogs and dogs, and then they go back to Godhead, this pastime is revealing that maybe they take birth as hogs and dogs, but unless their realization is purified, they will not go back to Godhead, right? So one should have strong faith, and unless one acts on that faith, one cannot go back to Godhead. So in our case, we may not be thinking of some mechanical means that we go and somehow die in a holy place and we go back to Godhead. It also extends to the fact that our devotional service should not be mechanical, because there is no mechanical way to go back to Krishna. And that's why if you remember in the beginning of the chanting of the holy name, it is said, what's the verse that what's the verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita that is spoken at the beginning of the 10 offenses? बहुजन्म करे श्रवण कीर्तना तबुता ना पाए Krishna pada prem kana. That one may chant the holy name of the Lord for many births, but one will not get the holy name if one is infested with the 10 offenses. So what is that verse saying? That even chanting the holy name will not guarantee you back to Godhead if one is doing it offensively. So what to speak of sinful activities? How can sinful activities take you back to Godhead. So Krishna will continue to give you opportunities to purify your consciousness, to develop the proper conception. And once that is developed, then the gates are wide open. Okay. Next verse, the last verse of the chapter.
Remaining in that ashram, the great King Bharat Maharaj was now very careful not to fall victim to bad association. Without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in the ashram and ate dry leaf only. He was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the super soul. In this way, he waited for death in the body of a deer. Bathing in that holy place, he finally gave up that body.
So this is the end of Bharat Maharaj's life as a deer. So previous chapters we saw Bharat Maharaj as King Bharat. Just these two verses talk about him as a deer. The next chapter will begin with him as being Jat Bharat. And Prabhupada comments that this is the real purpose of going to holy places like Vrindavan, Haridwar, Prayag, and Puri, which is to associate with other like-minded people. And when one is in that consciousness, then all the activities in the holy place, they become more potent. It's said that any act done in Vrindavan has 100,000 times, depending on who you listen to. Some they say unlimited number of times more. That's why we see, at least in Vrindavan, we see people from Delhi. They go to give charity in Vrindavan because of this. That any activity that you do gives a now in their case more material conception, that they want to, for every dollar that they give, they want to get $1 million back. But if one is in the proper consciousness, then the statement is absolutely true. That one is in the consciousness of Vaishnav Sangha, Vaishnav Seva, Dham Seva, Nam Seva, and then they take bath in the river Yamuna, then they perform devotional service like deity worship or study of the scriptures, then it becomes extremely potent. Just the environment itself is conducive, and the fact that this is the personal, it is the personal abode of Krishna, it becomes even more potent. So Prabhupada says that by constantly chanting and hearing the holy name and pastime of the Supreme Lord, one certainly becomes purified and becomes fit candidate for liberation. However, if one purposefully falls victim to sense gratification, he has to be punished at least for one lifetime, like Bharat Maharaj. That's the end of the chapter. I'll do a quick summation. That the chapter begins with Bharat Maharaj finding a helpless fawn. Mother had died, brings it to the ashram, and then begins to take care of the ashram and develops a lot of attachment. So much so that he becomes irregular and more or less gives up his spiritual life. And at some point of time, the deer disappears, and then Bharat Maharaj goes through the stage of lamentation, of condemning himself, that he had done something wrong. So we see that mood change of earlier on, he was thinking that he was giving shelter to the deer. Then while he's lamenting, we see that actually he was taking shelter of the deer. When will the deer come back? When will he again grace me with a smile? So the glorification of the deer in his mind, comparing it almost to the personality of Godhead, that the planet Earth has become auspicious because of the footprints of the deer, and the moon bears the marks of the deers. So all this is happening in this material lamentation. And in that, he gives up his body, he becomes a deer. As a deer, he remembers his past life, very careful not to repeat the same mistake. And then ultimately, he gives up his body as a deer also. Okay, so I'll pause over here and see if there is any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Is it okay if I ask question from the last class, which I was been thinking about the aparad that we commit to the holy name continues even at the level of prema bhakti. So my question is, does it mean that one attains Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti even at the level of Nama Abhas? Or the Prema Bhakti and Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti happens only after one goes into Suddhanam, chanting Suddhanam? Because you mentioned also Suddhanam immediately eradicates all the aparads that we commit in the holy name. So, I mean, immediately can be very relative term. In terms of eternal time, even a couple of lifetime is a blink of an eye. So how to like, is there anything known about what the 9 stages of bhakti from Shraddha to Prema, and then the three holy name, chanting of the holy name in Aparad, Abhas, and Sudanam? How do they correlate? Anything known about it, or do we have any understanding about that?
It's a good question, Prabhu. I don't have the answer to that now. So your question is that if one is at the stage of prema, does that automatically mean that the person is now at the stage of Shuddhanam? I don't know the answer to that, because you know, at least Vishwanath Chakravarti says that so he mentions the 5 level of eradication of offenses, like limited. And he gives the example. Limited is like if there's a piece of cloth that is torn, there is still the 2 pieces of the cloth there. Then pervasive, he said, like if a city is destroyed, but there is still that city. You can still point to that place, that this is where the city is. And then more, there is general and complete. So general is one particular aparat is I'm sorry, general means that overall the offenses are more or less gone. And complete means that they're completely gone, and absolute means that they won't come back again. They've been uprooted. So based on these 5 stages, he says that Nama Prad is completely eradicated at the stage of prema, but not absolutely eradicated. So what it means is that the effect of the offense is still there, very minute at the stage of prema. I think your question is that does it also mean that at the stage of prema one is still performing those offenses, right? And that answer, I don't know. I can try and find out for you, and I would request other devotees to also do. I think this is more of probably a research item. I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
No problem, Guru. Thank you. It'll be nice to know a little bit, but anyway, our devotional service is not dependent on that exactly, but still, it's good for clarification.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of these offenses, I had a table. I've made a table for this. I'll put it in the document that we share, so that at least that reference is there for ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhupada make a lot of reference and then give us hope that those who have joined ISKCON, following, the regular principle and all that there are hope for us. But what I'm trying to say here is he's talking about those who has taken to ISKCON full-time devotees, or like we are. I won't use this word pastime, but we're not like them waking up every day at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. doing the morning program and all that.
Yeah. When Prabhupada was there, then it was much simple that they were either full-time devotees or not. And the notion of congregation was not much established over there. So a lot of the comments that he makes is basically towards the situation that was existing at the time. Right? And there's also a conversation that Prabhupada has with one of his disciples, who actually, very similarly, he says that I would like to, he says something like, I would like to be a part of ISKCON, but not be a full-time devotee. Is that possible? Prabhupada said, yes, it's possible. And he says, so then I don't have to join ISKCON, but I can just associate with them. And Prabhupada said, yes, but then your advancement will be slower. Right? And it may be for that particular person, because that person was a little motivated. He was not very inclined to do service. So he found the service requirements within ISKCON to be tiresome. So he was trying to make a situation. So that answer may be more specific for that situation. Prabhupada would strongly, at least at that time, he would encourage people to join ISKCON. But he was also inclusive, right? Because they were those who did not join ISKCON, they were under the category of well-wishers. So these were people who were either helping through charity or they were helping through some other way. I think the basic premise does not change, right? So if somebody joins the temple, then it represents the person's commitment to his spiritual life. Right? So yes, there are more opportunities to make advancement. Whether they actually avail of that opportunity or not is different. Right? Nowadays, we see that many times congregation members, they're much more pakka in their sadhana and much more focused in the spiritual life than so-called full-time devotees. So it's a case-by-case basis. But if you were to look at your own life, that tomorrow if you make this decision that I'll move to the temple, then it represents an elevation of your commitment. Then now I want to dedicate 24 hours in the service of Krishna. Now I don't want to do anything. I remember one of my godbrothers, he had a family, and when I met him at Gita Nagari, he told me that he's giving up his job and moving full-time into the temple. And he had a small child at the time, I think, just maybe just a year or so old. And I said, Prabhu, are you sure? You want to do that? You have a family, and living in the temple is austere for individuals, but even for Grasta is more individual. And one of the things that he did share was this, that that he found pursuing a spiritual life a little bit difficult with so many competing priorities. And he had a very kind of a high-paying job. So it was something that he had to, in order to maintain his position, he had to put significant effort there. So he said, since I moved to the temple, life is much simpler. I just have one agenda, which is how to serve Krishna. So it's a lot more simpler, and I can just focus from morning to evening. Of course, later on, you move out to the temple. That's different, but at least that realization is there. So I think short answer to the question is yes. There's definitely more opportunities to make advancements if you're in the temple. But that does not mean that if you're not in the temple, you're not making advancements. You're definitely making. We are all making it. We'd like to think that we're making advancements.
So can you
Thank you,
come
Prabhu.
again, Prabhu? I missed that piece. So this devotee realization was, it was hard to grow spiritually when he is within the temple?
When he was outside the temple, he was saying, because he said he had a lot of competing priorities. He had a demanding job, and I think his big thing was his job. That his job was taking a lot of his time. He had to travel also. It was a traveling kind of job. So he had to eat out and etc. etc. So he was saying that there was a lot of anxiety in him about how to balance things. But he said when he moved to the temple, all that, he said now I have different anxieties. Different kind of anxieties. That
Anxieties will be there anyway.
Yeah, but at least they're all geared towards, do we have enough bhoga for tomorrow? Are we developing the congregation? But they're all in the same channel. I'm not spread over like job and this and that, families taken care of. So it was pretty inspirational talking to him.
Yeah, that's a challenging one. The anxiety which I see even in, it is a anxiety which is for Krishna, but definitely it is leading to, it is impacting the sadhana as well. The elevation or consciousness is not that in progress, I can say.
Yeah.
But I have one question, Prabhu. Like, it's like a practical one, I think. When we discussed about this prarabdha karma, like the cycle of, where does this, if a person, like if a devotee or a non-devotee who has been deceived or a cheating, right, mentality, and what should be the response? Is it like it is Krishna's arrangement for the deceit? Or because the consciousness of, if he is a devotee, he should let go as it is in Krishna's arrangement. That's it, right? Like, again, will it be again as I seeded somewhere for our next follow-up? That is.
So if we are deceived by a devotee, it is Krishna's mercy. If
Okay.
we deceive a devotee, that means it's a prarabdha karma. Right. So when it comes to us doing activities that are not spiritual, whether we quarrel with devotees or deceive them, is because of our material conditioning. And if we are subject to it, then we should understand that it is Krishna's mercy, because he wants something from us, detachment, and it's kind of interesting that this Sunday I had a very long conversation with another devotee who was discussing exactly the same thing, that I've been deceived by a devotee. In his case, it is affecting to the point that he doesn't want to come to the temple anymore. And so he was saying, I've been deceived by a devotee, and not that he's a new devotee. He's been practicing for at least 20 years ago, right? And he said, how do I understand it? And we talked for a while, but at the end of the day, I think that was our realization that if it happened to you, Krishna, in this particular case, it was more in terms of prestige, that, like he had said something and it was negated and something else. So it was basically loss of face kind of a thing. And I said, just think of it as what's the lesson Krishna is trying to teach you. That humility is important. It's not necessary for your service to be recognized all the time. There are times that your service, somebody else might take credit for it, right? So the lesson is that you need to be humble. But the flip side is that we don't start thinking that now we are instrument of Krishna to teach others lessons. So we start we start deceiving other devotees, or we start becoming hard on them, saying that, well, we are also Krishna's instrument. So when we do it for others, then we should know that it is our material contamination. And that gives us a balanced perspective.
Thank you.
It's also true for anything else also, Prabhu. It's not only deceiving, but also somebody insulting us, and then we are insulting them. So it's the same principle applies.
Same principle. That's like I said, whether it is insulting, or in this particular case that I was sharing, it was loss of prestige, that this person did a service that he put in a lot of effort, and then he felt that some other devotee took all the credit for it by basically misrepresenting facts, and he was feeling very bad about it. At one point he said, I need to be detached from service. So the thing with devotees is that they know a lot of philosophy, but when it comes to practice, then applying their philosophy to practice on yourself is difficult. That's why Sangha comes. It's good to externalize it, to speak to the others, and then it helps. But you're right, it applies to general interactions with devotees. Okay, so let's start with the 9th chapter of the Bhagavatam, 5th canto, the supreme character of Jat Bharat. And this is also a very short chapter, only 20 verses. And we'll probably finish it between this discussion and next week. We'll probably finish the chapter because the majority of the verses do not have purports on them. The chapter after that, so this chapter is essentially setting the scene of Jat Bharat. The last chapter was Bharat Maharaj, the fall down of Bharat Maharaj, then his life as a deer, then him dying as a deer. That's what it ended. This chapter begins about Bharat taking birth as Jat Bharat, and then they're setting the scene, establishing the character of Jat Bharat, which leads to the next chapter, which is the discussion between Jat Bharat and Maharaj Rangana about spiritual life, right? And there, the purports are long and the realizations are deep. This is mostly narrative over here. So it begins with the birth of Jat Bharat, and Jat Bharat's relationship with his family. So he has mixed relationship. His father adores him, loves him. His brothers exploit him. And then there is the pastime of Jat Bharat protected by goddess Kali when he was being when the dacoits tried to do a sacrifice for him. Okay. So we'll begin with verses 1 and 2, and these are also in prose, so we'll just do the translation.
Srila Sukadev Goswami continued, My dear king, after giving up the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj took birth in a very pure Brahmana family. There was a Brahmana who belonged to the dynasty of Angira. He was fully qualified with Brahmanical qualification. He could control his mind and senses, and he had studied the Vedic literature and other subsidiary literatures. He was expert in giving charity, and he was always satisfied, tolerant, very gentle, learned, and non-envious. He was self-realized and engaged in devotional service of the Lord. He remained always in trance. He had 9 equally qualified sons by his first wife. And by his second wife, he begot twins, a brother and a sister, of which the male was said to be the topmost devotee and foremost saintly kings. Bharat Maharaj. This Then is a story of birth he took after giving up the body of a deer.
So Sukadeva Goswami is now describing the next birth of Maharaj Bharat. So Prabhupada says that Krishna promises in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Suchina Srimatam Gehe, that one takes an opportunity to continue with their advancement. So Bharat Maharaj had reached the stage of Bhava Bhakti. As a deer, he does not fall down, so he does not give up anything. He stays at that stage, makes some advancement, and now he is born in an environment that is once again conducive to his devotional service. So the environment is not fully conducive because his father is described as a Brahmana, but later on we'll see that he's more of Vipra. This is more of a Karmkand kind of a Brahman, but also Vaishnav. But also he's linked to Lord. He's linked to Lord Vishnu. And Prabhupada says that even when he took birth as Jat Bharat, he remembers his previous birth as a deer and the births before that as King Bharat. Right? So due to his strong position as a devotee, he was gifted with the remembrance of his past life. Being repentant, he remained in a solitary forest and always thought of Krishna. Then he was given the chance to take birth in a very good Brahmin family. And so Prabhupada calls this out because this is not what happens by the law of karma. And by the law of karma, if a soul gives up the body of a deer, they take up the next form of life in transmigration. I'm not sure what the next form is, but they take up the next form. But from a deer becoming a Brahmana, and not just an ordinary Brahman, but a Brahmana in an exalted family. And so they calls out this, that his father was a Brahman who belonged to the dynasty of Angira Rishi. And so, an advanced Brahminical family. And not only that, he himself was fully qualified. So he was not just a Brahman by name. So his qualities are given for the father, that he had controlled his mind and senses. He was expert in the Vedic literatures and the other subsidiaries, expert in charity, tolerant, gentle, learned, non-envious, self-realized, and engaged in devotional service, remained in a trance. So his qualities are given here to indicate the environment in which Bharat Maharaj took birth. Okay. Next verse.
Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incident of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmana, he was still very much afraid of his relative and friend who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eyes as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord glories, which save one from the bondage of fruitive action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee association.
So this pastime reveals the potency of association from both perspectives. So when Bharat Maharaj was Bharat Maharaj, then he gave up the association of devotees and took the association of a deer. That was the cause of his fall down. When he was a deer, he gave up the association of deer and took up the association of devotees. And that was the cause of him being able to take a birth in an exalted family. When he's here as Jat Bharat, we see that he continues to operate on the lessons that he has learned. That give up the association of non-devotees and take the association of devotees. So what does one do if one is not surrounded by devotees? And which is why I was saying that Bharat Maharaj's father is not fully, he's considered, so his qualities are considered to be that of an exalted Brahman, but we don't see Bharat Maharaj taking association of his father. In fact, we'll see later on, he works very hard to not take association of his father. Now, the association with the deer was tamasic. It was in the mode of ignorance. People who develop this kind of association with animals consider in the mode of ignorance. Here, the association was in the mode of goodness. That he's surrounded by Brahmanas. His father is a very qualified Brahmana. But association that is not spiritual is all bad, whether it's in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. Now, it is relatively easy to give up the association of in the mode of ignorance. It is more difficult to give up the association in the mode of goodness. Right? Because in the mode of goodness, you see all these qualities that look good. That qualities of tolerance and forbearance and being charitable. And especially if this is your family, because there is intrinsic attraction to the family. So how does Bharat Maharaj deal with it? That he becomes Jad. So Jad was not his name. He's called Jad, and Jad means that stone. Jad means that something that is inanimate, non-sentient. So he became like stone, dull, blind, and deaf. So the advantage of this position is that one does not have to offend the other person. So the fact that he pretended to be somebody who was Jad meant that people were automatically not giving him their association, with the exception of his father, we'll see. But others, they just stayed clear of him. That this guy is foolish. What's the point in talking to him? So if somebody wanted to do Prajalpa, they would not go to Jad Bharat because he would not understand. If somebody wanted to perform certain material activities, they would not go to Jad Bharat, right? Because he was not able to engage in that. Right? So it's not meant to say that we become Jad, but we can develop that material indifference. Now, Jad Bharat was an extreme case, but I've seen devotees, they develop that material indifference, that you go and talk to them and say, these elections are going to be really polarizing. And they'll say, what elections? I don't follow the news. I remember when this is of course many years ago in the 90s, we had gone to, at that time I wasn't really practicing devotee, but somebody had told me there's a good temple in New Vrindavan. So with my friends, we had gone, and I had a friend who was staying in West Virginia. So I kind of made it like a tourist trip and stopped in New Vrindavan. So there was a devotee over there, and I mean, in retrospect, I know he was trying to like give us his mercy, but he was giving us prasadam, and he was sitting and talking to us. And at that time, there was this Operation Desert Storm going on, invasion of Iraq into Kuwait and invasion of US into Iraq. So that was the hot topic. So we were sitting and eating prasadam, And then I said, what do you think about this Operation Desert Storm? And he said, which desert, which storm? Which desert has a storm? And initially I thought he was joking. And I said, no, not this. I said, this whole invasion and that. So really, there is a war going on and this is going on. And so in retrospect, I don't know whether he actually he wasn't aware of it, or he did not want the conversation to go that route. But that was the end of the conversation. He said, I don't know anything about this. Now, if he had expressed certain interest, then I would have started talking more. That is this a good thing? That was the big thing, right? That is US doing the right thing or not? What is the impact on the oil prices and at work or everywhere? This was the discussion going on. I would have probably pursued the discussion on that. But then he said, I don't know anything about all this. That was the end of the discussion. And then he got an opportunity to speak about Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada, etc. So being materially judged, it's like a protection for us. And we don't have to actively reject. And we don't have to basically say, Prabhu, I want to focus on my devotional service, don't talk to me like that, right? That way we will offend people. We may, we may come out as being very, holier than thou kind of an attitude. I remember once I was in Vrindavan and there was a Western-bodied person, not in ISKCON, Western-bodied, and he was in Babaji Vesh. And we were just sitting, and then, I asked him, where are you from? And he said, I don't like people asking me these questions because, and he was apparently from Denmark. He said, I'll say I'm from Denmark. And then the next thing person will say is they have a great football team. And then the conversation becomes to football. So I don't answer these questions. I said, okay, I understand. But I did feel that, a little bit twinge at that time, that I was making general conversation and he rebuffed me. And this way I got over it, but almost immediately. But I did feel that. I feel that twinge. So it's a little difficult to be, and it's a little dangerous also, to be rude to everybody, to keep basically saying, I'm not interested. So Jet Bharat took the safe route. And he said that it's not that I'm not interested, it's just that I don't understand. Right? And we can also take this route of material jad, that we may not appear to be foolish and dumb, but at least we can, or naturally it might happen, because we don't devote too much of energy into things that are going on. We automatically become materially jad. Some person says that we don't know much. That's the end of that conversation. So Prabhupada says that Prabhupada gives two references in how to get out of material engagement. Right? He says that by material engagement, one becomes bound by the modes of material nature. Like Karnam Guna Sangasad Sadasad Yoni Janmasu. That by this activities of karma, Sadasad, like good and evil in this material world. And then he says that Mam Chavi Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevata. That by engaging in devotional service, one can get out. So when Bharat Maharaj took birth as a Brahman, he was not very interested in the duties of a Brahman. But internally, he remained a pure Vaishnava, always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. Right? And the second reference he gives is again from Bhagavad Gita, Man Manava Matutva Matpajiya Namaskaru. Like, so one internally constantly meditating on the Lord there. Okay, so let's move to the next verse 4.
The Brahmana father, mind was always filled with affection for his son, Jada Bharat. Therefore, he was always attached to Jada Bharat because Jada Bharat wasn't fit to enter the Grihastha ashram. He simply executed the preparatory process up to the end of the Brahmacharya ashram. Although Jat Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instruction, the Brahmana nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father.
So these 4 verses, 4 to 7, they talk about the attachment of Jat Bharat's father to him. And in a way, they're expanding on the same concept, that how to stay spiritually focused in the face of material challenges. So as I mentioned, that those material adversities that pain one, they may not necessarily be bad spiritually, because they give one realization. But those that are conducive to one's existence, like love from those that you're attached to, respect, wealth, they are more stumbling blocks for spirituality, because they're more of goodness. By nature, the soul is attracted to them. So we see this intense affection of his father to Jat Bharat, and Jat Bharat's reaction to again is Jad, that he does not, he never offends his father, but he's indifferent to his father. So Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this verse that the reason Jat Bharat was not willing to take up any of his father's instruction, because he was constantly realizing the form of the Lord. That's the point he makes, is that one should not neglect instructions of the superior whimsically. And Prabhupada expands on it in the purport, and he says that that only one is an elevated platform of devotional service can they neglect the recommended actions, right? And then he gives a couple of scriptural references. One is from Bhagavatam 1-13, Nata Pumbi Udvijashreshta Varnashram Vibhagisha. And it is said that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed by one's Varnashram is to please the personality of God. Right? So here Prabhupada is seemingly making the reverse case, that follow the Varnashram, which means follow the instructions of the superior. Only if they can be done in such a way that one is able to please the Lord. Jat Bharat, however, he is rejecting his prescribed duties. So everything that his father will be telling him are the duties of a Brahmana, and he is rejecting them. So to explain that, Prabhupada then quotes another verse from the Bhagavatam, Dharmasvana Sushta Pumsham Visvakshena Katha Suja Nautpadev Yadiratim Shramevahi Kevalam. That if activities that are being performed do not create Krishna consciousness, then they are useless endeavor. Right? So in the case of Bharat Maharaj, he was not dependent on these activities. He was already at a stage of attraction to the personality of God. So whether he did it or did not do it, it would not have mattered to him. But he was not doing it because of an overabundance of caution. That he had already suffered for it. So he wanted to make sure that he does not, even by a wide vicinity, by a wide margin, he is not somehow trapped into the same quagmire again. Right? So which is why he is rejecting these prescribed activities. And Prabhupada gives the example of 2 exalted personalities who neglected the prescribed devotees and the prescribed activities because they did not need to. They were already advanced. And one is Madhavendra Puri. And Madhavendra Puri's famous verse where he says that let all these prescribed activities of Karma Kanda, like the Sandhya Vandanam, getting up in the morning, taking bath. He says, please excuse me. I cannot do them. Why? Because I'm fully engaged in the service of Krishna. And the second example is that of Haridas Thakur, where Haridas Thakur does not reject it, but because of his birth in a Mohammedan family, he did not perform any purificatory activity. But because he was advanced in bhakti, he did not need to perform purificatory activities. So Mahaprabhu accepted him as Namachari. So the conclusion is that these Karmakanda activities, they are required if one is able to use them to make advancement in spiritual life. They are required if one has not developed spontaneous attraction to Krishna, or they may be required for preaching purposes. And so three situations are given. That one is that they are required for the purpose of purification, that they're connected to one's development in Krishna consciousness. So one performs these karma activities, or one performs if one is simply purifying themselves, which is the original intent of the karma kanda, that the person is not taken to spirituality, but needs to elevate following the injunctions of the Vedas, then one performs karma kanda activities. Or the third is that one is performing them to preach to others. Statement made by Krishna, like that, as great men do, others follow in all respects. So in the case of Bharat Maharaj, he did not need any purification. He was advanced in Krishna consciousness, so he did not need to depend on them for executing his spiritual life, and he did not need to. So he obviously preaches, but he does not rely on this to preach. He does not rely on activities to set an example or preach. He preaches more because on the strength of his own personal realizations. Okay, we'll do one more verse, and then after that pause for any discussion.
Bharat behaved before his father like a fool, despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge. He behaved in that way so that his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He would behave in a completely opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would wash them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instruction during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him the Gayatri Mantra along with Omkar and Vyahi. But after 4 months, his father still was not successful in instructing him.
So Vishnu Chakravarti writes that the father of Jat Bharat thought, I will teach him the Vedas starting in the Shravana month, after preparation. Next, I will teach him Gayatri. So for 4 months, starting with Chaitra, he taught him the 3 lines of Gayatri, but Jat Bharat could not remember it completely. He taught him in an incomplete manner. Right? So this is Jat Bharat's way of keeping himself aloof. That while his father, who was favorable to him, who was trying to guide him, thinking that he would take, so he was coming from a platform of lot of love and concern for him. But Jat Bharat is so focused on not getting sucked up into material attachments that his way of handling it is that he appears to be unable to understand. Now, later on, we'll see that Bharat is supremely intelligent. When he starts instructing Maharaj Raghunath, then it's not that he had actually lost his intelligence. In fact, he is extremely intelligent, but he pretended to be foolish. And he did that to protect both himself and his father. Because if he had told his father that you are a materialist and you're guiding me in the path of material, then it would have offended his father. It would have hurt him. And so instead, he took on the position of being judge. So his father continued to have compassion on him. Father continued to have affection on him, but at the same time, he protected himself. So simple things like washing your hands after evacuating. So he would do it the other way around. He would first wash his hand and then evacuate. Or learning the Gayatri mantra, learning the Omkar. The father would continue to repeat, ask him to repeat. He would repeat it in a different way, or he would say it once and then forget it. So in this way, he was keeping himself aloof. Okay, so I'll pause over here, see if you have any discussion. Okay, if not, then we'll end here and we'll resume. Hopefully, like I said, we'll finish the chapter on Wednesday. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.